Did you read Gifted Hands and think medicine was your calling, and then you later on went to study medicine? But you turned out like, oh my goodness, this is not what I had in mind. Well, I have come to help you. Hi, I'm Roving. Welcome to Roving Through Books, and today I'll be discussing Small by Small by Ike Anya. Let's get into it. The first blob of this book that got my interest was when Chimamanda said, "A small miracle of a book, it entertains with delicious storytelling." There's something about blobs that gets me. I mean, sometimes I want to read a book, but I'm not very sure. Then I see a blog by an author I like, and I'm like, okay, yes, I want to read this. So, there's a book. I went to a bookstore recently, and I saw this book called Dust. And one of the authors that gave a blurb on it was Taye Selassie, the author of Ghana Must Go. I was like, okay, this is something I want to read because the blurb was so beautiful. So seeing this blurb by Chimamanda, just I didn't know how to explain it. I was just like, yes, this is something I want to read. Now, what is this book about? There is a man called Ike Anya. He's the author of the book, right? And he's a medical doctor. So he tells us, oh, these are the things I went through to become a medical doctor in Nigeria. And as he's taking us through these experiences, he's also educating us on some medical terms because when you're done reading this, it feels like you have like a little bit of introduction to medicine. You cannot have the full introduction, especially when you know that these people are reading like mad. So just reading a little memoir cannot detail the full medical experiences. Now, one of the things that stood out to me when I read this book was an excerpt. There was an excerpt in Brittle Paper where someone was talking about infertility and how some couples have infertility, and after a while the wife comes to tell the doctor that, oh my goodness, I'm finally pregnant, and doctors are like using one side. Yeah, they have bombastic side eye expression because they know that the man is definitely not the father of the child. Now, there are some exceptions, yes, but generally, the expressions of doctors are like, sister, we know what you did. We'll just let you go because it's not our business. Also, there's a thing called patient doctor confidentiality where if a patient doesn't want a doctor to disclose something, the doctor is not supposed to disclose it, even to the person's partner, and disclosing that it has severe consequences for the doctor. I think in some cases it can lead to the doctor losing their license. Imagine studying like a mad person for many years and losing your license because you disclosed a patient's confidentiality and it was to save someone else. Well, the world is what it is. I like this book. The reason why it will come up in another book review, but I was introduced to Ike Anya in a collection of work, and I liked the tenderness I saw. So when I saw that he had written a book, I knew this was something I wanted to read, and I was not disappointed. I was so not disappointed. There is a way he narrates his story that makes you alive. I don't know how to explain it, but the story is very beautiful. Now, for the saying small by small, I remember for I think throughout that year and the year after, and even now, sometimes I still tell myself small by small because it is important that we learn that not everything in life happens like overnight. I don't think there's anything like overnight success. So books like this, they keep you in check. Like, oh my goodness, it's one step after one step. This book is one of the reasons why I rate medical doctors. I'm one of those people that finds it hard to condemn medical doctors because by reading some books of their experiences and also by being friends to a few, I understand what it means to be a doctor. So one of the books I read was Doctors by Erich Segal, and I remember reading it. I was like, so even in the US, you guys suffer. It's not like in the US different. Like, oh my goodness, you are going to read less books. You are going to read so many books, and there's going to be so little time. And you see how some of their classmates suffer from these experiences that are very, very extreme. These extremities, and it's sort of painful because these are people that are working to save your life, and some of them lose their lives in the process. It's very sad. So it makes me I would have said almost deify doctors because I rate the sacrifices they are making for humanity. So when I see situations where doctors make mistakes, I'm sometimes caught aback because to an extent I understand that sometimes they are human, so they are prone to making mistakes. And people will be like, "Oh, it's because you haven't had a family member suffer from wrong doctor." I have, right? I have. In fact, I have been on both sides of the table. I have had a medical doctor as a family, as a friend, as a family member, and I myself, I have been a victim of doctor malpractice. So I'm not just saying this as a point of like, oh my goodness, let me just say this because I have to say this. But I think when you understand that now, there are many doctors, so they have very many different attitudes. There are some doctors that are devils, like there are those doctors, but there are some doctors that genuinely it's a mistake that they made and they do not want it to ruin their career. Like, I mean, there are some doctor experiences I've had, and when I think back to it, I was like, anyways, can I complain? Can I really complain? But yes, and another thing this book talks about, like aside from the fact it humanizes doctors, is that Ike Anya makes reference to the fact that he's a reader, and I don't know, but I think us readers we have a kind of like antenna. Like when someone has read a lot, when they write, you can feel it in their book. So I was reading it, and when he talked about his reading experience, I was like, this is my guy. This is my guy. I've never met him before. We've never had a conversation, but I had that kind of experience because so I know how it feels like to like be looking forward to a book at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month, depending on how your life is, right? Also, he talks about Nigerian and because he was in Nigeria at the time, so obviously he had to talk about Nigeria. And it's very sad how Nigeria has been. I mean, this is not it's not a today's experience that Nigeria is this way. I mean, imagine watching people die for the most I do like just the most flimsiest of reasons. Oh, this does not exist. Oh, this does not exist. I mean, this year we lost someone because there was no equipment in the hospital. And why are there no equipment? Why was that equipment not available in the hospital? Because of power supply. And you're like, hmm? It doesn't make sense because it just shows how bad, how poor Nigeria has degenerated into, how people's lives are not meant to count for anything. Why would there be not, like, if these things are not in the hospitals, where are they going to be? Is it private clinics? And even some private hospitals do not have those amenities, if we are going to be frank, right? Another thing he talks about is how doctors deal with the loss of their first clients, their first patients. So the first time I experienced something like this, I think it was Her Daughter's Dream or Her Mother's Hope by Francine Rivers. And I felt as distraught as the nurse herself because it was like, oh my goodness, after everything, this person still died. And I liked, and there are some patients that are really cool. Like, you know, the way there are some doctors that are really cool, there are also some patients that are really cool to treat. And you know, being a doctor and being a patient has nothing to do with your personality.
And that's all for me for Small by Ike Anya. See you guys later. Bye.